Hey, so we're here today at Living Word Temple in Winnipeg, and with all that has gone on these last few weeks of George Floyd and the death of George Floyd and the protests that have come out of that, and really the cry of a people to our neighbors down south, we really wanted to have a conversation outside of just ourselves, and we want to learn. There is this line that says, ignorance breeds fear, which breeds hatred, which breeds violence. And so we want to address this from that point of our ignorance. So we want to learn, and we want to have a posture of humility. So I'm joined today by Evelyn and Catherine and Paul Winter, who works with Living Word Temple, and lots of other churches as well throughout northern Manitoba and Winnipeg. So the last 3 years I've been able to work with these folks to some degree, and I'm just really excited to be back here to learn. So I've sent them a few questions, and they are going to help us navigate these waters as we learn. So Evelyn, I'm going to start with you. That George Floyd video, what goes through your mind as you think about that video of someone being hurt by someone who is in power, and maybe what has been your experience or those you know?
Oh,
I'll hold this for you.
Well, I didn't know the story of George Floyd just till today.
Right.
But my son's gone through that, but he wasn't killed. But, you know, they handcuffed him and roughed him up, and then after that, he was let go. And then my other son, he was beaten up by the police, and then he ended up in jail. And like even today, he's traumatized by that, but I guess he doesn't want to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah,
well, that makes sense.
Yeah. And he spent 5 years in jail. And he didn't come back a better man.
No.
He just came back hurt and angry and vengeful, you know.
Catherine, for you, what was it like?
Well, when I saw the video, and when you think about what was going through the people that were videotaping it, how helpless they felt, that they couldn't do anything because these are cops, that they're in power and they have guns, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people that were standing around there heard that man's plea, and how I was thinking about how he felt. Like, you know you can't breathe, and you're asking people for help, and nobody can seem to help, and it feels like that too here. Like you not all of them. I know there's really amazing cops,
Right.
but the ones we encountered, because I've raised all my 11 children in the city, and the targets were my boys. One actually had to cut his hair because he was always stopped, and he had to cut his hair because he didn't want to be harassed anymore. So he cut his hair short, and he became dressed preppy, and they never bothered him after that. So that's he was targeted because he wanted to practice who he was, and so I really feel for the people that were actually there to witness. And I know we witness a lot of stuff here, and it's almost the same thing. This one time here, just right here, right across here at our church, there was a bunch of young people that were like play fighting, and two brothers were fighting. And some guy, a white guy actually, came out and asked them to stop, and the kids told him to mind his own business. And he came out with a I don't know, to this day they don't know if it was a real gun or a pellet gun or an air gun, or anyway, one of the that the gun was pointed to was my own daughter. And And I was just coming, and there was so many young people here. And as I was listening to them, he said, "Oh, nobody cares. Nothing's going to be done." Yeah, nothing was done. And,
So how have you experienced that? Like, you see what's happening now in the States is this systemic racism, which is the powers that be or the structures in society or the culture really keep people from having equality, from having equal opportunity. How have you experienced that systemic racism in your life?
Well, systemic to me, what I've read in the English dictionary, I was trying to, okay, what does this word mean? And that's what I mean about words, right? When we don't really understand those words. Like she said, well, I've never experienced racism, she said, but to us it's like, people are just plain mean, you know? And I guess it has a name. It's called racism. When they judge you by the color of your skin, by what you do, where you live, you know? Just because we live in the north end, I think this is the best neighborhood. If you people want to move here, the best neighborhood. People are so kind and they're so true.
Tourism.
Yeah. And I've always lived here. 43 years I've lived in the north end. But there's still a lot of racism. People that drive by, they throw their garbage. Like, we're trying to keep our north end clean, right? And they have no respect for our neighborhood. Cops are pretty good. There's the bad apple, but I think most of them are pretty good. But then, and I really wish that they would be accountable to each other instead of covering for each other. And I think that would really help our people trust the cops, because nobody really trusts them. Nobody doesn't trust the cops. And it's handed down because of what the children see, right? But I see good work for them around the neighborhood. They're actually doing a lot of work and they put their lives in danger. But that systemic racism with our systems that are set up. And I never saw that before. I just used to think, oh, life is hard. Like, I was actually ignorant about my own systemic racism that was happening to our people, because you're just so used to it. But I think that's the problem with Canada. We're so used to people being treated badly. Like, we just kind of turn the other eye. I don't want to get involved. But I think as followers of Christ, when I look at Jesus' life, that's what he did. He helped them, the least of them, the oppressed. That's who he helped. And if I'm a follower of Christ, I can't just turn the other eye. Of course, I'll pray like crazy, which we do. But we also have to be involved in the changes, involved in when we see somebody getting hurt, say something, you know? Or even if you have to go to the store with your white brother, sister, maybe they won't follow you. I'm just kidding. I don't know. But we have to intentionally do the work that needs to be done. Right to our prime minister, our politicians. I don't know, just be active in making those changes, because we can't just ignore the stuff, because people are getting hurt every day. Like when that young girl got shot, she was only 15. It was actually one of my daughter's not acquaintance, a friend of hers. And it was really hard on the young people. And she was just a young 15-year-old girl. You know, all the robberies that they were doing in the liquor stores, and she was just reaching out to get that bottle, and she got shot. And that's one of the things too that went through my mind about the Floyd thing. In that 2-week span, 3 of our community members, Indigenous members, were killed, and there was no outcry of anything. It was just like normalized that our Indigenous people get shot, get killed, go to prisons, taken by CFS, or the 40% of the healthcare system that services our people. 40% of Canada services our people. Like all these things that's that racism, that systemic racism. Do we really want to change? Do we really want to fight for this? If it puts bread and butter in people's homes because of the oppression our people go through, are people really willing to fight and make those changes?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, and that's the question, that it's not just words. It's not that this isn't just a good conversation, but it leads us to deeper relationship and understanding. That's definitely our hope and our goal. Paul, you've worked for quite some time now with the culture of the Indigenous culture and people. And what do you see from that? You have that unique vantage point of kind of being in the middle and walking with stories, but it not being your story. What would you like us to know? What would you like people to know?
That's a really hard question to answer. I think as settlers living in Canada, people don't even realize how racist they are. I didn't realize how racist I was until I began to work with a people group that I didn't realize I was racist against. And then once I worked within the people group, then I suddenly was able to see like how deep the racism is in our country. So from my perspective, I find it really sad that if I go to a court case or to a CFS visit or to a police encounter, that the behavior is different from the officials that we come in contact with if I'm there, if a white person is there and standing up for a First Nations person. And it's so hard for our community members to think to themselves, well, they have two choices. They can invite me to one of their meetings and know that it'll probably go really good for them. But how horrible is that they need a white person there for them just to receive justice? How hard is it for them to think, I can't get justice if I just do this on my own? And how devastating is it when they don't receive justice just because they're a First Nations person? So when we witness these things, when we go through these things with our folks, it's truly heart-wrenching to see just the damage that racism does without people even realizing that they're racist. Again, most people don't even realize they're racist. They just think this is my opinion or this is the truth. Like when you started us off with saying people are just sometimes ignorant to their existence, to what they think is true, and then when they come into contact with something that's new, they're so bothered by it, they don't know what to do with it. And so I think Canada is in a unique spot to start to deal with its racism because the US is dealing with it now, and look what it looks like. I think it's no coincidence that this happened in the middle of an already stressful situation with COVID, because now people have just had enough, and they're actually saying enough's enough. We're not gonna allow racism to affect us anymore. We're not gonna allow a whole people group, millions of people in the US, to be treated differently just because of their skin color. And it's everywhere in the world. It's not just the US, it's not just Canada.
Thank you, Paul. I'm going to give you the final word, Evelyn.
Yeah.
Okay? So your hope, where does your hope lie for the next generation, for the future, for today?
To find Jesus.
To find Jesus?
Yeah, because about 7 years ago we came to this church and I found Jesus.
Ready to go?
I told the group previous, but you guys can talk just amongst yourself. You don't feel like you have to look at the cameras. But if you do, this is the one.
But if you were going to look at a camera.
But
get my shot.
no, but otherwise, you
that's right.
Just talk amongst yourself. It's all good.
You're all rolling, right?
Yeah, we're ready whenever you guys
Okay.
are. It's all good. Yeah.
Hey, so I'm with Brooke. Brooke is 19, part of the Living Word Temple as an intern or children's pastory type role that she plays here. And also with Trevor, who's also part of the leadership here at Living Word Temple. And is also fostering 2 children? Two? So his experience, we're excited to hear from as well, because again, like our first part of our interview was, the goal here is that we get some healing by Westside and others who are listening in from our ignorance, kind of just enlighten us. What can we learn? And so we come with a posture of hopefully humility and just knowing there's so much for us to learn, and as a listener. So I have a few questions for you, and thanks for being a part of this. Really appreciate both of you taking the time for it. Mm-hmm. So again, what has started this conversation or has taken it to this point is the video of the gentleman George Floyd in Minneapolis, who lost his life through a really crazy act of a policeman who takes things way too far, way too aggressive. It was just hard to watch. And as you were watching that, you told me you have seen that video or know of the story. What was going through your mind as you see that happening?
I guess I was like kind of in shock, and it kind of made me like upset because it was really unnecessary for 3 officers to be on him like that, and the fact that he was literally saying that he couldn't breathe and they weren't doing anything about it. They just didn't care. It just like makes me upset.
How about for you?
Yeah, a lot of the same thoughts, and like just thinking like what would lead someone to ignore someone's like cry for help. Why would they not, like as a police officer, when you hear someone struggling, even if you're dealing with them aggressively, you still want a positive, peaceful outcome, not a violent and aggressive one. So that was kind of where my head was at with it.
So Brooke, what is your experience? What has been part of your story when it comes to racism? Were you born and raised in Winnipeg?
Yeah, I was. Well, when I think of how do you say it?
Systemic?
Yeah, systemic racism. I think of how far it goes back, because it goes back to like residential schools and how the white man's way was the right way and whatever. And a lot of the CFS care systems, a lot of the kids are just Native kids, and a lot of those kids don't really have a chance. And I was in CFS, so it really hurts a lot to see that going on.
And how about for you? You're fostering. Tell me the stories of your foster parenting.
It's a really unique thing for us to deal with the systemic racism, because as like me and my wife are both like European descent, and we have 2 Ojibwe foster boys, and so when we hear words like systemic racism, in the beginning I almost felt like I was part of it. And so I worked really hard to make sure that I was like learning as much as I could about Ojibwe culture, and that's kind of how I like grew and developed. And of course, being at Living Word, where we have a large Native population, really helped as well. And what I learned is that the systemic racism part comes from like me being complicit and just making my boys like me rather than working on their history. And right, like, so when my wife and I got married, she didn't just absorb all of my Mennonite culture, she brought her own stuff in, and that's how we became a family. And so when our boys came to live with us, we brought in their culture and their family too, and in that we find like unity. And so the systemic part of it now for us is making sure that we educate the boys in how to deal with a world that sees them different, right? Because they are like my 2 boys are so loving and caring, and they think everyone's their friend, and then they get really confused when they get treated differently. So it's it's interesting as a foster parent, and having to teach them how to always smooth out and be as peaceful as possible when they're dealing with people. So Brooke, growing up in the
the CFS system in foster care. What would you like people to know, or what have you learned through your years and your experience?
Just like basically what Trevor said with the culture, like if a kid is like taken away from their family and their culture, I think it's really important for them to learn about their culture wherever they are and like know who they are and where they come from. So I really like how Trevor does that for his sons. But yeah, there are good foster homes out there. Like my last foster home, it ended off really good because it was a Métis woman, and she was really strict, but she really cared and loved me.
Strict is good?
Yeah,
Okay.
she like kept me in line, I guess I could say. Not most of the time, but she did her best. But yeah, I guess like being in care, I just did not want to be at home. I wanted to be with family or friends, and then now that I'm out of care and I'm at home, I just like never leave home. So, but I really think it's important for like the CFS system to like involve the children's culture and stuff like that, and I have seen that a lot. But yeah, there is like some I don't know how to explain it, like some things that just aren't right still, because like there's still like that racism that's there, and like yeah.
So where have you found hope, or where do you see hope for the future to change really what's happening now, and for the next generation, for your generation? Where do you find hope?
Oh, where I found hope was here. And then yeah, like as soon as I got into CFS, like I was brought here and I just stayed here because it's like a really like it involves God and it involves our culture, and I really, really like that. So
And what have you learned? What's the lesson or two that you have learned or are learning? Because it is a never-ending journey.
Yeah, CFS is just such a huge system, and so it's been interesting as a foster parent is that like I hear stories about the system, but the CFS workers that we've had have all been really good, strong, encouraging people who give us the tools and the resources that we need to be good foster parents, and to like learn about their culture, right? Because that was one of the biggest struggles right at the beginning for us is I couldn't find any literature or stuff on like how to have Ojibwe boys move into your house, right? And as foster parents, as social workers, as biological family, that rather than passing the buck between each other, is that we all work together and take ownership of these kids, because you know, it's traumatic being transitioned and moved around, and I just want to see us as the church, as Living Word, as you guys out in Morden, that we just take ownership of family units rather than just removing kids from homes until the parents magically get their act together, or until they complete their treatment, but rather it's a more holistic thing. And we yeah, that's where we really see like the biggest hope. Like Brooke is such a big success story because she did get to go back and live with her mom, where that's not the story for a lot of kids, where they actually end up never being able to live with their parents. And so, yeah.
I want to thank you both for your time. It's just, we really appreciate it, and we know we have so much more to learn, so far, much further to go. But again, like I said to the last crew, could we work together, right? You continue to teach us, we continue to learn and invest in each other, and build bridges. That's just the absolute best thing. So we look forward to it. Cool. Thanks Brooke. Thanks, Trevor.
Yeah, no problem.
Where do you see hope would be the last question. Where do you see hope for the future, or for today?
Well, the church and Jesus.
That is the answer. That is the answer.
Interview.
Let's go. Interview done. Jesus, drop the mic.